I was on the Senate floor when we had this huge tax increase called the Clinton-Gore tax increase of 1993, $32 billion tax increase. I was opposed to it. You guys won, and I lost. The estimates now on whether it's Kyoto or any of the other schemes to reduce CO2 is estimated to be in excess of $300 billion. Now, your estimate from your administration was actually $338 billion. That's 10 times the tax increase of 1993. Now, here's the problem with it. Not only is that a tax increase, but is disproportionately on the poor, the people on fixed incomes, the people who, the elderly, individuals who, as a percentage of their monthly budget, spend 5 times more on energy than the average household. So I consider this the largest tax increase in history, 10 times greater than the Clinton-Gore tax increase of 1993. It's the poor have to pay for it. The science isn't there, and it's something that we just can't do to America, Mr. Vice President, and we're not going to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Mr. Vice President, you have 30 minutes to use in whichever way you would like.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for your generous introduction to come and be here today. And Senator Inhofe, thank you for your words of welcome, and I look forward to questions and an exchange of views here. To my fellow Tennessean, Lamar Alexander, Senator Alexander Lamar, thank you so much for your kind words and your warm welcome. And I want to note for the committee what I'm sure most of you know. Senator Alexander, as governor of our state, was associated with keen attention to environmental protection in a way that was quite sensitive to economic development, and is part of a tradition that includes Senator Baker and others from the time when the issue of protecting the environment was genuinely a bipartisan issue. And some of us believe that it's not now and should be. I understand there are differences in the way that would be phrased here today, but I want to acknowledge the record of one of my senators, Lamar Alexander. And Senator Mikulski and I served together in the House of Representatives, as she noted, and in this chamber. And there were multiple pieces of legislation that had our two names on them, and it was always a pleasure and an energizing experience to work with Senator Mikulski. And I'm honored, Barbara, that you would come and do this here today. Thank you so much. To the other members of the committee, I've got so many close friends on this committee. Forgive me for not going down the aisle, but I want to acknowledge my respect for all the members of the committee. My father served here in this chamber, and I was reflecting this morning on the differences that have occurred since he first came to Washington in 1938. And there are all kinds of jokes about the hot air on Capitol Hill. I'm not going to make those jokes, but I am going to refer to the air on Capitol Hill. Because when he came here in 1938, there were around about 300 parts per million of CO2 in the air that he and his colleagues in this Senate breathed. And today it's 383 parts per million. It didn't really go above 300 parts per million for at least a million years back, maybe longer. But in the Antarctic ice record, that's about as far back as they can go. And even though the Earth has gone through all these big swings in natural cycles, the CO2 content never went above 300 parts per million in all that time. And just in the short span of time from my father's first service in the Capitol here and today, it's gone up a dramatic amount. And more CO2 means warmer temperatures. there really should be no doubt about that. That's been known for 180 years. And for at least 100 years, they've known roughly how much the temperature would go up with what concentrations of extra CO2. For most of human history, we lived on the harvested energy that came from the sun, and it was a net energy balance. And then with the beginning of the use of coal and then oil and other fossil fuel supplies, we began to use the accumulated reservoirs of the hundreds of millions of years worth of accumulated solar energy. And of course that meant returning carbon to the atmosphere in very large quantities. And from the early days of that period, there were a few scientists who said, wait a minute, that's going to have some consequences. And it did. And it has now reached a point where we've literally changed the radiative balance between the Earth and the Sun. And the scientists who study global warming gained a lot of their expertise by looking at the other planets in the solar system. And Mars has just 1% of the Earth's atmosphere, and the temperature is not 15 degrees centigrade or 59 Fahrenheit. It's 55 below zero on average because the CO2 doesn't trap the heat. Venus, by contrast, has much more CO2, and the temperature is above the boiling point of lead, and it rains sulfuric acid. Not the kind of weather forecast you want to see in the morning. And it's not because Venus is closer to the sun, because it's much hotter than Mercury, even though Mercury's right next to the sun. It's the CO2. This is extremely well established, well understood, and well known. Senator Boxer, I want to start off by saying that there's really hardly any way to overestimate or overstate the degree of hope that people out in our country have because of what you're doing, because of what this new Senate and Congress, everybody hopes will do. This is not a normal time. We are facing a planetary emergency. And I'm fully aware that that phrase sounds shrill to many people's ears, but it is accurate. The relationship between humankind and planet Earth has been radically altered in a very short period of time. And what would make us believe that we could go through these changes and not have an impact on the planet? We've quadrupled human population in less than 100 years, from 1.6 billion in 1900 to 6.56 billion today.